You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast, Episode 3. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. And today we are going to be talking about my story. So you can learn a little bit more about me and how we got here. And to do this, I have invited a friend of mine, Lee Heyward, to interview me. She's someone that I've known for the last couple of years, but she doesn't really know my story. And so I think that will bring out maybe a little bit of a fresh perspective, things maybe I haven't thought about in years, and give you a different insight into who I am and how I got here. Thanks for doing this, Lee.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Awesome. So I will just turn it over to you at this point, and I will be the guest.
Okay. All right. This is it. This will be my show now. So it is funny because you and I have known each other for quite some time, and we know lots of fun, intimate details about each other, but I actually do not know sort of certain parts of your journey with fibromyalgia. And I kind of wanted to start by saying, I want to hear about, how this began for you and how you sort of figured some of these things out. But I think one of the things that I have found just by getting to know you and, doing our work together is that you have such an interesting take on what fibromyalgia is for you. And I'd love for you to kind of start by sharing that with us, and then we'll kind of go into your journey.
All right. Awesome. This is something actually that I don't talk about very often because I think it can be really hard for a lot of fibromyalgia patients to hear. It's not an easy thing, especially if you're newly diagnosed and if you're in a lot of pain. What I'm about to say may sound very challenging. But the honest truth is, when I hear the word fibromyalgia, I smile. It's like you're talking about a friend of mine. And I really do love fibromyalgia. I think I know it sounds really weird, but I really do. I mean, it has changed my life in all the best ways. It's actually made me a better person, a more caring person. I've been able to contribute to the world around me in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. I've been able to make a difference in people's lives that I wasn't making before. And I've got to meet all these amazing people. I've got to go amazing places and do amazing things. I don't know if I would have written my books if it hadn't been for fibromyalgia. So for me, fibromyalgia has brought in so many blessings that I actually, I love it.
Well, and I'm sure it's interesting to hear, because I think even, you hear of people being diagnosed with various things, or you have been diagnosed with something. And I think we all have kind of a way in our head of how we think we would deal with things. And a lot of it is just survival. I'm going to get better, but you've taken it to one step more, which is really true and honest embracement. And I think that is what I've been able to watch in you has made such an impact on so many people. So that's really cool. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, when were you first diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and how did you start to figure this out?
So I didn't get an official diagnosis until I think it was early 2007. But I can look back over my life and I can kind of see fingerprints all along the way. I was one of those kids that was always sick, always had things going on. I was diagnosed with chronic headaches when I was a teenager, and there was always something not quite right physically with me. And I started doing my own research when I was in my teens to try to figure some of this out. And I think the first time I asked a doctor if it could be fibromyalgia was probably in 2000 or so. So it took me a good 7 years to finally get an actual diagnosis.
And were you the first one to mention that word? Like, were
Yes,
you
I
who brought
was.
that to the attention of the experts?
Yes, I actually, I remember I emailed my doctor at the time and I said, here's what's going on. Is it possible that I might have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue? And I used an acronym for chronic fatigue. I can't even remember which one it was now. But the nurse that wrote back to me says, I'm not sure what that is, but let's get you in for an appointment. And I was like, oh, that's so encouraging. Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, I mean, that's fascinating because, like, how much longer would you be sitting around waiting if you hadn't done this proactive work? Um, and this is skipping ahead a little bit, but you and I have talked a lot about the idea of like full integration, both in business and sort of life. And you know that I will be obsessed. I'm obsessed with the Steve Jobs biography, and anybody who has read that or knows anything about Apple knows how they really operate in a way of full integration. And I kind of love that you sort of started that on your own. But how have you sort of in this process learned who needs to be on your team?
Oh, that's such a good question. See, this is why I invited you to do this.
Oh, oh
um,
good.
how did I decide who needed to be on my team? Um, well, one of the big things for me, just the way I'm wired and the background that I have, is sort of this idea of life is a grand science experiment, and let's try something, see what happens. Does it help? Does it hurt? And then like make adjustments and go from there. So a lot of figuring out who needed to be on my team was looking at areas where maybe I wasn't quite where I wanted to be. I had adopted this idea of that if I could get all the individual parts of me working as well as possible, then the larger scale me would work as well as possible. So I started looking at some of those little things and seeing, okay, my sleep isn't awesome, so let's find somebody to help with my sleep. Or I have all these chronic headaches, so maybe I need a neurologist to help me with the chronic headaches, or whatever those little things were. So I kind of tried to look at the gaps. And then the other thing that I did was I was very proactive actually about taking people off of my team.
Ooh, that's a
It
great
was
point.
just as important for me. And you brought up Steve Jobs. That's actually one of his quotes that I love, is that what we don't do is almost more important than what we do. So taking people off of my team was almost as important or more important than who I added to my team. So if I had somebody where I felt like, just wasn't respecting me or not listening to me, the doctor who was like, I don't really know what that is, but let's check you out. Or I think this is just depression from your stressful job. Like, okay, I got to replace that person because that's not helpful. Right?
Right. Yeah. And I imagine too that there is a decent amount of, and we've talked about this in other areas too, of like what you should be doing. And so you feel like you put all of these shoulds into place, but they're not necessarily the right path for you in particular.
For sure, for sure. I hear a lot of people talking about like nutrition is a big one, what we eat, how we move. Like those seem to be the two big things every person on the planet is told, right? Like you need to change what you're eating, you need to change how much you move. In other words, diet and exercise. Right. And for me, yes, those pieces were a part of the puzzle, especially at first, they were a big part of the puzzle, but over time, they have been less important as other things. And I think it really is important just to take that mindset of this is a science experiment and see what actually gives you a benefit. And if it helps you a little bit, that's still worth noting because lots of little bits add up over time, right? And I think a lot of times we discount the little improvements, and you can still get to 100% if you've got 50 things that help you 2%, or, you know, a combination thereof. But I think a lot of people are looking for the big magic bullet that's going to fix everything. And I was happy just to get a little bit here and a little bit there. And I knew if I just added up all of those little bits, right, like pennies in a jar, eventually you'll add up to something.
Yeah, that's really cool. Was there a way to, I mean, like there is no magic bullet. Did you have anything where you, I don't know, that you recommend to people in ways where you like were tracking things that you tried, or like, you know, were ways that you could sort of track here are the positive upswings that we're looking at?
There were a few things that I did tracking wise to kind of help me know what was making a difference. So I was tracking my pain levels and my energy levels, and actually have a worksheet for my clients that I use. And those of you who are listening to the show will include the link in the show notes so you can see some of these tracking tools. But I think it's really easy. It's really easy for us to forget, right? Like what it actually was. And our memory gets fuzzy. And this is true for everybody, but even more so when you've got fibro brain, which is fuzzy anyway, right? So actually tracking numbers, tracking what my pain levels were, and not so much worrying about what my pain level was at any given moment, but more what the trend was. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? The other thing that I used, which kind of happened by accident, but has been such a major help for me, is actually using a step tracker. I decided, for whatever reason, I decided one day I wanted a pedometer for my birthday. And so I got one. And then, a couple months later, we went golfing. And I say it in quotes because my sister and my husband, they were actually going golfing. And I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. I'll drive the golf cart. I know I can't walk that much, so I'll drive the golf cart and I'll quote golf, right? And then 2 days later, I was so exhausted, and I'm like, what the heck did I do? All of these. This is something that goes through so many fibromyalgia patients. It's like, I have a flare now. What the hell did I do? Like, I have no idea. So what I discovered was that I could go back and look at my activity that the pedometer tracked. And that day that I thought I was just driving the golf cart, I wasn't really doing much. I actually walked 3 times more than my normal amount of steps.
Wow.
So, when you do something like that, like 3 times the amount of activity that you normally do, of course you're more tired. Of course you might be in more pain. And so using that pedometer and tracking my steps was huge. I started to see my steps kind of like dollars, right? Like I had a certain budget for the day of how many steps that I could use. And let's see, going to Costco is going to cost me 1,000 steps. But if I only have 2,000 steps in my budget for the day, is that how I want to spend them? Can't go to Costco twice in one day, and all of those things. And starting to think about budgeting my energy the same way that I think about budgeting my money. And that really helped me a lot in terms of managing the energy that I did have, making better choices on what I wanted to spend my energy on, rather than just like running out and saying, what happened? Where did it go? I knew exactly what I had spent it on, and started to have more consistent energy so that I could plan for things, right? Like I could say, yes, I would love to have lunch with you in 2 weeks because I know my energy is going to be consistent enough that I can actually do that.
Right. Boy, that's so powerful. Even just those words, budgeting energy, to actually start to think about that, it's so much more empowering than thinking, am I going to have enough energy?
Right. Right.
That's a cool story. So you mentioned your husband. I know you have a lovely husband.
Yes.
What was it like for you guys? You were married when you were first diagnosed. I know it was, a very significant life change for you. What was it like for you guys as a couple and for your marriage?
It was super, super interesting. So we had been married maybe 6 months when I was diagnosed, maybe a little bit longer, and we met on the internet. So he lived in Florida and I lived in Oregon, and he moved to Oregon about a month before we got married. So at the point when I was diagnosed, we had been living in the same town for only like 7 or 8 months, something like that. And I think it was a huge shock to him because when you are, talking to somebody on the phone or, meeting for a weekend or whatever, like I would be the best version of myself in all the ways, right? Not just
Mm.
like my personality or how I looked, but just like how much energy I had. Whether it mattered where he parked going to the grocery store, right? How far I had to
Mm.
walk to the door. Those kind of things didn't matter when I was just visiting him for the weekend. But when you're doing it day after day after day, I remember many conversations where I was like, really? Do you really have to park way out here? Like, have I not told you this a million times? I can't walk that far. So it was definitely challenging. And I think the thing that was the most challenging for him, which I totally get, is the fact that it changed from day to day what I could and couldn't do. And there was nothing on the outside to tell him whether it was a good day or a bad day. So
Mm.
one day I would be like, yeah, no problem. We can park wherever and I will walk to the store, or I'll, do my own things around the house. And then the next day I'm like, can you get me a glass of water? And I just like I can't do as much. And there's no, like, to him it's all the same and very confusing. Why today can you not do this when you did that exact thing yesterday? And just the fluctuations of my energy and my pain levels, and it being something that he couldn't see, I think
Mm.
really tough.
That's really challenging. So, and I'm sure you probably talk about this with your clients, but I'm curious, like, what have you learned in terms of like, how do you communicate that to a spouse or to a loved one to sort of do it in a way that doesn't make you feel like, you can't park there. I can't, you want to be empowered and feel good about yourself, but also have that person that you love understand. Like, how do you do that?
It's hard, and I think you have to find what works for you. So, but the biggest thing is just that word communicate, right? Like
Mhm.
you cannot expect them to read your mind. And I know that sounds so obvious when I say it, but if you really think about all of the things that you do in life, there are so many times where that's actually what we're asking the people in our lives, our spouses, our friends, our family to do, is to read our minds or to read our bodies and to know what we need, sometimes even if we don't know what we need. And that's totally not fair. It's not fair to them and it's not fair to you because you're not getting what you need. So the biggest thing is just to like figure out a way to communicate, share that. The other thing that I think is really important is to make it about you and not about them. So I tried very hard to ask for what I needed rather than talk about what he should or shouldn't do, which I think is a big difference and feels very different to the person who's hearing
Mhm.
it. I also had to decide what things I just needed to do regardless, like what I like absolutely had to have, and be willing to do it for myself however that needed to happen, right? So if I, for instance, didn't have enough steps to go to Costco, that responsibility was mine, right? And if he wanted to go to Costco, then my responsibility is to, sit in the car and wait, or not go at all, or whatever, and not really expect him to change what he's doing, right? Like if he wants to go, he can still go. That's totally fine. I just need to stay home because I've used all my steps for the day, right?
Right.
And really be good about choosing to do what it is that you need to do and not expecting other people to change what they're doing because of it, which means of course we've got to do a lot of inner work on ourselves, being okay with that. But the more you can, and the less drama there is around that, the easier it is to get what you need. I think the part where a lot of people get into trouble is that we assign all of this emotion and drama to simple things like, I'm going to choose not to go to Costco today because I've used all my steps, rather than uh, all the other stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a shift.
It
Well,
is.
and it's
And
funny too. Communicating is not an easy skill, no matter what your scenario is. My husband and I have gotten in the car to go on a road trip, and we are from the same town, and one of us was going to one parent's house and the other was going to the other parent's house. Like communication is challenging. So I think it's good to kind of hear that you have to sort of communicate with your own self in terms of like budgeting the energy, and then bring that into the rest of your family.
absolutely. And there's so many creative ways that you can communicate too. I had one client who was very tired of always answering the question, "How are you feeling today?"
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like, most of the time it's not very good, and it's just, it can be annoying. So what they ended up doing was, I had a couple of different clients do a couple of different things. One had sort of this little indicator dial on the fridge that she would put to, so her family could just look at the fridge and see how she was doing that day. And then I had another client who had like a jar full of rocks, like decorative rocks on the kitchen counter. And the level of the rocks was how good she felt, right? And she said that it gave her such satisfaction when she was having a bad day to just pour those rocks all over the counter. You could just like look at that. And it was like a visual for them of, oh, today's a bad day.
And it's weirdly empowering because just the people do it out of politeness to communicate, but often you really have to think about what sort of communication people need. And so I could totally, like, pouring that jar out would be liberating.
Yes,
Don't even
exactly.
ask me about it. I poured the jar out. We're done.
Yep.
Funny. Well, so now obviously you are an amazing coach and doing all these great things. But when you were first diagnosed, like, what was it like before you had the outlook of "I love fibromyalgia"?
Yeah. Yes, because it was not always that way.
Not so much.
Yeah, I started off like most people. I'm like, what is this horrible thing that's happened to me? Um, I told this story in I think it was the last episode, one of the earlier episodes, about my husband sort of giving me a talking to, because I was complaining about my body, and I was complaining, like we girls often do, especially when you're in a body that isn't quite working right. It's defective, I'm fat, all the things, right? And he's like, every time you do that, that puts me down because I chose you and I think you're beautiful. And so that was like, whoops.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's so true.
Yes, exactly. And so that was a big thing, starting to shift to try to see myself from his perspective, um, rather than just from my perspective, right?
Mm.
And then the other thing that I did was just start to look at, if this is what I have, if this is the diagnosis that I have, then what can I do to make the most of it? What can I do to, at the very beginning, I'm thinking like, how can I get rid of this, right? How can I overcome this completely? How can I heal this? And so I was looking at all of the everything that I could find, to try to improve. And I think the the mind shift that happened for me was really looking at this as my new job. I hadn't been able to work, and so I had nothing else to do, right? So I just made getting better my full-time job. And I journaled about it, and I read books, and I did research online, and like that was my job, was to get better. And what was it that I needed to do to accomplish that? So I really tuned into my body and tried to really tune in to what makes me feel better, what makes me feel worse, what do I need? Do I need more sleep right now? Do I need to sleep in? Do I need to, what do I need to do? Right. And that, I think, has been such a gift. It's hard to do that tuning in when you're in so much pain, but if you can, your body will totally tell you what it is that you need. And for me, it's like it doesn't matter what's going on. I know exactly what my body needs and how to get to where I want to be. So if I'm in a flare, I know exactly how to get out of it. If I'm going to do something that's extra strenuous, I know how to make sure that I'm going to be okay the next day. And, all of these things. But that's a skill you have to develop, right?
Mm.
And for me, that was really the attitude that I took at the beginning. But it definitely wasn't easy. Like, one of the things that I discovered during that time was that I could really only leave the house once a week. It didn't matter whether I was going to get my hair cut, or going to Costco, or going to a doctor's appointment, or whatever. I really could only leave the house once a week and stay feeling semi-decent. I won't say good, because I wasn't good yet, but more than once a week would actually make me feel worse. And I wanted to be on the upswing instead of the feeling worse swing. So that was tough, right? Because then at that point, I was going to a lot of doctor's appointments. I was seeing a chiropractor, I was seeing my primary care, I was going to physical therapy. Well, that's often like several appointments in one week. So being able to speak up for myself and say, when the doctor is saying, okay, we would like you back here on such and such a date, to look at my calendar and say, I already am doing something that week. So what about the next week? And really ask for what I needed. But that was tough, realizing I could really only leave the house once a week and still maintain how I felt. Um, like, it didn't matter if it was a fun thing or a not fun doctor thing or whatever. Like, and I was the one who had to stick to that, right? There
Mm.
wasn't anybody else who could help make sure I did that thing. It was me that had to be good about keeping those boundaries.
Mm. It's interesting because you had to educate yourself so much, and then you almost have to give yourself permission to just totally be you and do you, and do what's best for you.
Yep.
So I know that, you travel all over the place, you are very active. You leave the house many more times than once a week now.
Yes, I do.
How did that happen for you? How do you go from only being able to leave the house once a week to literally you can get on a plane and go speak and be fantastic and impact all of these people?
The biggest thing to know is that it took years. It wasn't fast. I didn't go from not being able to leave the house except once a week to traveling all over the world in like a week or anything like that. It has taken me years. Like, that was probably 11, 12 years ago, when, so it's been a while. And every time I get to a place where I feel like, oh my gosh, I am so much better, I am awesome now, like, there's even more awesome. So even though I'm doing all of these things, I fully expect that there's even more improvement that I could make at some point in my life. But just that continually looking for, what can I improve, even if it's just a little bit. And I love the story of the tortoise and the hare. And I feel like that's me. I'm the tortoise. I just like keep plodding along. Nothing super fancy, nothing super dramatic. No, all of a sudden I did this thing and it changed my life. It was just one little step at a time. But over the course of 12 years, one little step in a certain direction takes you a long, long way, right? And that, I think, is is the most important part, is that you just don't stop and you just keep going in the direction that you want to be. And there's this weird balance that we have to do between accepting where you are and wanting something better, right? And if you get stuck with accepting what you are, then you get stuck, right? And you might like never get better. But if you get stuck on the other end of only wanting to get better, then it makes for a situation where you're always pushing, you're always striving, you're never happy, you're not enjoying the journey. And so trying to find that balance. And so for me, it's been a lot of just, like I said, tuning into where is something that isn't quite as awesome as I would like it to be, and what's a step that I can do to take that. And, there's even been changes, like people wouldn't see it from the outside, but there's even changes that have happened in the last 2 or 3 years, especially in regards to my travel. So I haven't taken daily pain medication for a very long time. But when I would travel, I would do that just sort of as a preventative measure, right? I'm going to be stuck in an airplane for 6 hours. So I'm going to take some pain meds so that when I get off, I can actually move. Right. And then one day, a couple years ago, I was getting ready to go on a trip and I noticed I didn't have enough medication to do that the way I normally do. So I'm like, I was super nervous. But I thought, okay, I'm doing pretty well. Let's try and see what happens. And I'll just take it if I feel like I needed it. And I did still have to take it 1 or 2 times on that trip. It was about a week-long trip. But I didn't have to take it as much as I thought that I would have to take it. So I'm like, wow, like that was an improvement. Nobody on the outside actually saw that. But for me, I was like, wow. And so now I don't even, the only times I really have to, the only times I really have to take pain meds is if I sleep on a bad bed. That is like the thing that will totally kill me every time. But for the most part, yeah. So just looking for those little things.
The
Just,
little thing.
yeah.
Well, and you had to do so much of the education. I mean, I know obviously this has now become your job and your life's work, but how much, like, if that education would have existed and you didn't have to go do all of those things, could you have done it faster?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely no question. So thinking about where I've come since I was diagnosed 12 years ago, obviously it took me 12 years to get here, right? But there's a certain amount that your body just needs time to heal, right? There's a
Right.
certain amount where you can't go faster. But the part where I had to like track down the information and absorb the information myself, and then get that information to my doctors, or find a doctor that also knew the information, right? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
um, that process definitely made things take longer. And a lot of things like, accidentally discovering that a pedometer can help me manage my energy. Like if I had had that from day one rather than 2 years, 3 years in, right, that would have saved me 2 or 3 years, right? So I think this is just, wild guess off the top of my head. I would guess that I could have gotten to where I am now in probably half the time if all of the things that I know now had been available to me at the beginning.
Hmm. Is that part of why you began being a coach?
That's exactly it. I really it was the strangest feeling when I first started feeling better. I had this very clear visual image that I was walking around with like this beautifully wrapped present in my hands, the kind with the shiny paper and the big bow, and like, one
The
of those
Tiffany
presents.
box.
Yes. And I felt like that was the gift that I had been given, of being able to feel better and being able to go out and live my life again. And I just wanted to share that gift with other people because I knew how hard it was for me to find out those things. And I'm a smart cookie, right? I love science. Like there were a lot of things that I had going for me that maybe somebody else doesn't. Like maybe they don't know where to go to look for those research articles, or maybe they don't have the science background to understand what's in it, or maybe they just don't like it. Maybe they don't have the same troubleshooting background and skills that I had from, working at a software company and having to do tech support. There were a lot of things that I had that I think made this easier for me that I knew not everybody had. And so I just wanted to share that. I wanted my pain and my journey to make a difference for somebody else, because as soon as that happens, then it becomes bigger than just me. Right? It's not just this thing that happened to me. It's something that then becomes a blessing to other people. Like it's that whole lemons to lemonade thing, right? Like if life gives you lemons, if life gives you fibromyalgia, and you can figure out a way to actually have that help somebody else, there's a greater purpose there and a greater calling there. And it just, I don't know, for me, that made it easier to bear. It made it easier to handle the diagnoses I would get. I remember one time leaving the doctor's office with another new diagnosis. I think it was when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And I was like, here's yet another thing I can help my clients with, right? Rather than being like, oh man, why do I have to have all these things happen to me? It's like, oh yay, I get to learn about something else.
You're like literally the walking encyclopedia for fibromyalgia.
Exactly.
Well, and one thing, now this is my heart, but one thing that you literally are the walking thing of is fabulousness and looking amazing. And that's not always easy when you just don't feel awesome. I'd love for you to mention, kind of that journey of what that's been like for you. I mean, look how cute you are. And, but there's a lot that goes into number
Yeah.
one, feeling comfortable in your skin and your body, especially when you have pain. But then number two, really feeling good about who you are.
Yes, definitely. So, for sometimes there's some days, I mean, we all have them where you just feel like you want to stay in your pajamas all day. And there were way too many of those days when I was first diagnosed. I remember one day in particular where when I decided to file for disability, where I was in my pajamas. It was the end. Excuse me. I was in my pajamas. It was at the end of the day. I'm pretty sure I had been in those pajamas for most of a week. Like it was the reality of the situation. And there were some days where the simplest thing would be what would turn me around, right? Like I would be getting dressed in the morning and I would choose to wear a top that was a little bit more cute. Maybe I'm still not going to put on makeup. Maybe I'm still going to be in my yoga pants, but maybe it's just a little bit cuter t-shirt than the others, right? And then putting that top on would make me feel like, oh, well, maybe I'll put on a little lip gloss. Maybe I'll put on a little mascara. It's like one thing would lead to another, or sometimes the opposite would happen. I remember quite often putting on like lipstick or lip gloss and then being like, well, maybe I'll do my hair. Maybe I'll
We'll do the rest.
and just do a little bit. Um, because when you look good, you feel better. And that is it's such a challenging thing, right? Because we don't want to assign our worth and our identity to how we look, because there's a danger there too. But when we when we look in the mirror and we like what we see, we feel better about ourselves. Like there's just really no way around that. I think that's perfectly natural, perfectly normal. And so if you aren't feeling good in your own body, right? What can you do to feel good in your own body? Like it doesn't matter if you're having a bad hair day or if you have fibromyalgia. I think the concept is kind of the same, right? Like what can I do to like how I feel in my body? And it's A lot of it is listening to what actually makes you feel good and what doesn't, right? So there might be clothes that when you put them on, actually don't make you maybe you look good in the mirror, but they actually don't feel good on your body.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned a lot, especially working with Lee, about what feels good on my body. Like, for instance, the materials have to have a little bit of stretch. I can't wear like a normal button up woven shirt. It just is not comfortable. It just doesn't feel good. My fibro body needs that little bit of stretch. Little things like that, how they fit, where they sit on my body, what necklines are like, certain things trigger my headaches, like actually being aware of all of that and starting to build a wardrobe of clothes where everything actually feels good on my body. And it doesn't matter what I go in and I choose, I still like, I feel good, which makes it easier to look good, but also realizing that whatever it is for you that helps you feel that way. I have one friend who wearing boots makes her feel like a badass. Right? So whatever your thing is, and realizing that fibromyalgia does change what feels good, right? So another friend of mine loved to wear heels, but she can't wear heels with fibromyalgia. But I would ask the question, so what would give you a similar feeling? Maybe you can't wear heels again, but is it the strappiness of the toes, where maybe like you could wear low-heeled strappy things and kind of get a similar feeling, or whatever that might be. I think it's important for us to just tune in to what actually makes you feel good, what doesn't, and then what are the easier ways to get there. One of the things that I do often is I have somebody do my hair. That's very tiring in a fibro body. Washing your hair is a hard thing to do, but you can find a local beauty college that'll wash and dry your hair sometimes for less than $10, and that can just be a nice way to treat yourself, and also realizing the times when it's okay not to do all of the things. A few years ago, I was talking with one of my clients, and she was asking me, do you get up and put on makeup every day? And the answer is no. I don't necessarily. When I'm sitting there on my zero gravity chair doing my client
Mm-hmm.
calls with my headset on, like, in some ways having makeup on makes it a little bit more annoying, right? Like makeup gets on the headset and right? So it just depends on what helps me feel my best in that particular moment. So for me, it's actually more about how I feel than how I look, and sometimes how I look affects how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
long rambling answer there, but
Well, and right now trending on Netflix is the show Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. So everyone, and I read her book years ago, but her whole concept is do what brings you joy. And I really feel like so much of what you do and what you've been able to do in your work with fibromyalgia and as a person with fibromyalgia is actually pull the joy out of it, which sounds insane. But that's really what you've done. You've really sort of brought it in and embraced it. And so I don't know, it's interesting. So just talking about like, clothing or hair or pajamas that, even if you aren't leaving the house, just that little thing that brings you joy.
mhm.
I love seeing you do that. That's very cool.
Yes, and I think that for many of us, fibromyalgia can be a massive taking away of things. Maybe you can't eat the things you used to. You can't do the activities you used to. You can't. Maybe you can't even do the job or be the kind of mom you used to be. And so there's like all of these things that fibromyalgia kind of takes away from us. And so I think we have to be so much more purposeful about adding in the things that bring us joy. And there's a whole exercise that I have in my first book about building your joy list and how to add it back into your life. Because in my opinion, if you don't have that joy, like what are we doing this life before, right? Like it's just like we need that fun. That's the stuff that brings us joy is why we live life, right? It's why we do the other things. Like I would stay up all night long if I was left to my own devices. I am totally a night owl, but going to bed early lets me do some other things that I do love, right? And so it's like that's kind of how I see finding those things that bring us joy versus the things that we have to do sometimes to be able to do that. And so we've got to be super super conscious of it, and we've got to be very purposeful about adding those things in. Otherwise it's just a very depressing situation. And that's I think where people begin to really feel like prisoners in their bodies, is when they don't have those joyful things that they can add in and enjoy whatever they are for you.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's cool. So I won't keep you too much longer. But so you are a successful entrepreneur. You are a woman who has learned the ins and outs of fibromyalgia, continues to learn because, we all continue to learn about everything. I mean, what's like the one thing that you want people to know that either about you or just about your journey that is most important to you?
I think the biggest thing, and we've talked about it a little bit in here, is just where I am and the way I talk about fibromyalgia and the way I talk about my life might seem so far from where you are right now. Know that I was there also, and that I didn't do anything super wild or dramatic.
Mhm.
It was just very doable activities, little bit by little bit over the course of time, and just making that choice to continue that path. There were many, many times that I would have loved to have quit. Like truly, feeling your best is a full-time job. Healing is a full-time job. And sometimes you want a vacation. But just continually choosing that path. And I think that honestly, that's one of the biggest gifts that coaching has given me, is that it's helped keep me on the straight and narrow in the times when I wanted to quit, because I'm talking about it every day. I'm coaching my clients every day. And as I hear the words come out of my mouth as I'm coaching them, I'm coaching myself at the same time, just to like keep going, keep looking for that tiny little bit of improvement, and know that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So this isn't you're going to feel as awesome as I do a month from now or a year from now. That it's a long game that we're playing here. And so don't give up, accept those little wins along the way, and find help if you need it. I know there is no way that I would be where I am if I hadn't had a coach. I mean, hiring a coach was actually the thing that turned everything around for me. And so I believe in coaching, not just because I am a coach, but more because it is the thing that changed my life. Hiring a coach and working with a coach. But we all need that person alongside of us to cheer us on, because it can get very discouraging when you've been doing the same thing for a year and you're not seeing the improvements yet. I mean, for me, coming off of medications was, I don't know, a 3 or 4 year process. And I think that that's the kind of thing that makes it super easy to give up when it takes that long. So yeah, know that you're not going to get to where I am that fast, super fast. But you can possibly, depending on what else is going on in your life, get to where I am, in if you look at it as a long game.
Well, and I think for me, before I met you, I didn't know that there was such thing as a fibromyalgia coach. I mean, and I know you talk about this on the podcast, but just like, what does that mean exactly? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. We will be talking about that. But in a nutshell, it's like any other coach, right? Like I think most people are familiar with the idea of a basketball coach or a football coach, or maybe even a business coach, maybe even a life coach, who really is just helping you get the best out of yourself. So a fibromyalgia coach is just a coach, but we are totally focused in on fibromyalgia. So if you are struggling with your fibromyalgia, a fibromyalgia coach is going to help you with that exact struggle that you're having. So we're going to help you find the treatment options that are going to give you your best results. If you don't have a background like I did in troubleshooting and figuring out if this helped, if this hurt, that's the kind of thing a coach can help you with. Look for patterns in your life. Oh, every time you eat tomatoes, 2 days later, your pain is higher. True story, right? So, but not something you would notice yourself. It was
Mm.
only me seeing a client's food diary that I was able to see that. So we are really totally focused in on helping you get your best life possible when you have fibromyalgia. We are educated in the science. We understand the medications and the treatments. We know we have a whole history of things that have worked for us, worked for our clients, and we can ask the right questions to help you figure out what's going to help you the most. And I think most importantly, we are all fibro people who have been there. Like when you say it's a bad day, we know what that means, right?
Mhm.
Or if you say you're tired, we know what that actually means, not just, oh, I need to go take a 20-minute nap and I'm good, right? So you're talking to people who actually get it and can give you practical strategies for how to move through whatever it is that you're dealing with, because it's what we do every single day.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing this story with me and with the rest of us, and for creating this community. It's an amazing thing that you're doing.
Awesome. And thank you so much for doing the interview. I knew you would
Yeah,
ask
thanks for
questions
having
that
me.
I haven't thought of in a long time. So it was awesome. You had some good ones.
Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here for this episode. Our next episode, I'm going to just give you a little bit of overview of what I believe fibromyalgia is. I'm going to share some of my favorite bits of research that have been done and why I find them interesting. That'll be on episode 4. And then episode 5, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Ginevra Lipton, who is a fibromyalgia specialist and runs the Frida Center for Fibromyalgia. Her clinic is all about fibromyalgia. We're having her come and talk about fibromyalgia from her perspective, the research that she has done on fibromyalgia, and the bits of research that she finds super encouraging and gives her some hope for the future of fibromyalgia. So as always, make sure you go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com for the full show notes. For this episode, I'll have some of those tracking worksheets and some information on how I use a pedometer to help me manage my energy and all kinds of other goodies for you. See you next time.